Eyes all over. Once upon a time, there was an old man named Eyes All Over because that is what he had. He had an eye on the top of his head that could see things that happened far away. He had eyes on the back of his head that could see things that happened yesterday. He had eyes on his elbows that could see other people's mistakes. Eyes on his knees that could see people's hopes and dreams. And even he had an eye on the bottom of his foot which could see things that would never happen. Now, Old Eyes All Over had a big pot of gold that was the thing he cared about more than anything else in the world. And every day, that big pot of gold got just a little bit bigger because he would go to the marketplace and he would stick his elbows out and he would see when somebody was making a mistake. Oh, for example, that merchant right there was selling a pig for only $1 when that pig was worth $3. Well, Old Eyes All Over, I have a bargain. And he would go buy the pig for $1 and sell it for $3, and then he would have some more gold to put in his pot. Now, of course, Old Eyes All Over would never tell anybody that they were making a mistake, because then he wouldn't get a bargain. And one night, he was counting all his gold, when suddenly, dun dun dun, he heard a knock at the door. Who is that? Thieves, he thought. But then he realized, no. Thieves wouldn't knock. They would just break right in. And so he looked with the eye at the top of his head, things that happened far away, and he was able to see on the other side of the door, and there was this skinny girl there dressed in rags. She seemed harmless, and so he carefully hid his pot of gold under the floorboards and went and opened the door just a little crack. "What do you want?" he said. "Oh, please," said the girl. "My name is May, and I don't have anywhere to live, and I'm hungry and tired, and it's cold tonight. I'm happy to work for you. I can chop firewood, I can cook, I can clean really well. Would you let me stay here and maybe give me a job?" "A job?" said Old Eyes All Over. "What? You think I'm made of money? Be gone with you!" Because he could see with the eyes in his knees. He could see her hopes and dreams. "Aha," he said. "You hope to one day live in a nice house like this one. You hope to be rich. If I let you in, you'll probably just slit my throat in the middle of the night." "Oh, no," cried the girl. "I would never do that." Said Old Eyes All Over. And he carefully took off his shoe and put his foot in the crack of the door so that he could see with the eye that could see things that would never happen. And sure enough, he saw that May would never do such a thing as that. "Well, all right," he said. "Come on in. I need some firewood. I need some cleaning. But I don't have any money to give you, and I don't have a lot of food. But you can sleep in the barn. You'll be warm enough there." "Thank you," said May. "Thank you so much." And she quickly started chopping firewood, and pretty soon had a roaring, beautiful fire in the fireplace, and Old Eyes All Over felt warmer than he ever had. In fact, he didn't really remember what it felt like to feel warm on a cold night. Well, he went to bed that night in his toasty blankets, and May went to sleep in the barn. And in the morning, when Old Eyes All Over got up, well, his house was clean, and there was a steaming breakfast on his table. May had gotten up much earlier than he had, and she'd been working for several hours already. "This is kind of nice," thought Old Eyes All Over, as he sat down to eat the cooked potatoes and beans that she had prepared for him. "Well, here's some bread," he said, tossing to her a bit of leftover bread that he had from the day before. "You can stay. You can work, you can stay, you can sleep in the barn. I'll give you some bread in the morning and some soup at night." And that's what happened. Now, Old Eyes All Over, as time went by, realized that he had made a very good bargain. "Look at this," he said. "She doesn't cost me anything, and she works harder than 6 men put together. What a bargain I have." Not only that, it was quite pleasant to hear May singing in the garden as she worked, and to have all this fresh, lovely food cooked up, and to once in a while laugh at one of May's jokes when she smiled at him. And one day, after many years had passed, because May stayed with him all this time, one day a young man was riding past Old Eyes All Over's house, and he heard the most beautiful music coming from the garden, and he stopped to investigate and saw May. Now she was dirty from working in the garden, and she was tired, and she was dressed in rags because she was still wearing exactly the same clothes that she'd been wearing when she'd first arrived a few years earlier at Old Eyes All Over's house, because of course it had never occurred to Old Eyes All Over that she might need new clothes. But even so, she was the most beautiful girl that this young man had ever seen, and quickly he found himself falling in love. Now, after visiting for a few days and talking with her, the young man decided to come and ask Old Eyes All Over for his permission to marry May and take her to live with him far away. Now, Old Eyes All Over, when he saw the young man, he didn't even need any of his special eyes to realize that this young man was rich, really rich. And so he thought, I can get a good bargain out of this. And so he put on a sad face and said, "Oh, but if you take May, who will prepare my breakfast every morning?" "Oh, well," said the young man, and he pulled off a ruby ring from his finger. "Here, this will be plenty to hire one of the best cooks in the land to cook for you every day for years." And Old Eyes All Over saw that ruby ring. He realized that this young man was richer than he'd even thought. And he started thinking, I bet I can get even more out of him. And so he looked even sadder and sighed, "Oh, but if you take May away from me, then who will make the fire at night? I'll be so cold." Because you see, Old Eyes All Over had looked with the eyes in the back of his head, and he'd seen that just yesterday the young man had bought a nice, expensive, fine fur coat. And so Old Eyes All Over thought, I can get that too. Said, "Oh, if only I had a nice, fine coat to keep me warm, then maybe I could consider letting May leave." "Well," said the young man, surprised, "I actually do have a nice, fine coat that I just bought yesterday. It was for my father, but I can get him another one. Here." And so, Old Eyes All Over now had a ruby ring and a fine fur coat, and to his surprise, that coat was even more expensive than he'd thought. In fact, the buttons were sewn on with golden thread, and the buttons were made out of jewels. "Well, well, well," thought Old Eyes All Over, "I wonder who this father is that is worthy of such an expensive coat." And so he stared with the eye on top of his head, the eye that could see things far away, and he saw the young man's father in a very fabulously wealthy house surrounded by gold and jewels and spectacular wealth. And he thought, I can get an even better bargain out of this. And so he pretended to cry. "Oh, no, but May is so special to me. She has become a daughter to me after all these years. I'm going to miss her. Oh, she's worth her weight in gold. I could only think of parting with her for her weight in gold." "Her weight in gold?" said the young man, quite surprised. "Well, she's certainly worth it." And so the young man left and came back a few days later with a cart carrying May's weight in gold. Old Eyes All Over was amazed. Who could this be that had so much more? He had to get more, and so he sneakily stared with the eyes on his knees and saw that the young man's hopes and dreams were to someday become king, because sure enough, that's who he was. He was a prince, and his father was the king of a fabulously wealthy land. "Oh," said Old Eyes All Over, "no, no." And he pretended to cry and hug May. "Please, don't take her away from me. I'm going to miss her so much. She's worth everything to me. I love her so much. Oh, I couldn't even part with her if unless I had half of a kingdom." "Well," said the young man, "half of a kingdom it is." And he gave Old Eyes All Over half his kingdom. And then he put May on the back of his horse, and they rode off together. Old Eyes All Over. Look at this bargain! This skinny girl didn't cost me a thing for years. She worked for me all this time, and now I have even half a kingdom for her. But as he was staring at himself in the shiny pile of gold that he now had, he accidentally saw his reflection through the eyes of his elbows, and he noticed that he had made a mistake. A bad mistake. But he didn't know what it might be. Over the next few days, however, he knew. Because Old Eyes All Over would get up in the morning, and the whole house would be empty and quiet, and there would be no breakfast waiting for him, because, of course, he was too stingy to actually hire a cook. And in the night, even though he had this nice fur coat, there was no cheerful fire roaring in the fireplace, no fire to keep him warm. And he started realizing that he missed hearing May's lovely voice singing in the garden, and hearing her laugh, and seeing her smile. And he started realizing that she truly was worth her weight in gold, and that he would happily have given all the half of that kingdom that he now had, just for May to come back. But he looked through the eyes on the soles of his feet, and he realized that May would never, ever return. And regret filled his heart, because now he realized that in all this time, she had given him everything, and all he had ever given her was hard words and hard work. And he had sold the only thing he'd ever really loved. And as Old Eyes All Over wept bitterly in front of the cold, empty fireplace, alone in his house, he realized that despite having eyes all over, he truly had been completely blind.